Hello, I'm Julia Rogers, and this is a quick overview for students who are thinking about taking a gap semester in early 2021, or if you're a senior or a high school student who's thinking about taking a gap year in fall of 2021 after you graduate. We're going to do a quick overview just to give you some nuts and bolts to think about when it comes to planning a gap semester or a gap year. Now I'm going to share my screen because I think there's some great visuals that go along with discussing gap year options. So bear with me a second while I get that started. And here we go. So a little bit about who I am, just as we get started. My name is Julia Rogers. I'm a gap year counselor, which basically means that professionally, I get to help students who decide to take gap time and help them coordinate their plans. I'm also on the board of the Gap Year Association, which is basically a nonprofit that is dedicated to the growth of the gap year option in the United States. So I've been working for about 12 years in the gap year space, and I am really excited to tell you more about the options available to you if you decide to take time off this year. Now, to be clear, I like to have a working definition for students who are considering gap time because I think it's really important to delineate what a gap year is and what a gap year isn't. A gap year is an intentional period of time, and really it's buoyed by activities of enrichment that are personal to you. So it is supposed to be formative, it is supposed to be challenging, you're supposed to be getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things, exploring new places if you can, and basically expanding your horizons so that you can be more prepared to succeed if you are going to college, if you're starting your career, if you're trying to decide what your next educational step is. It's basically offering you a rite of passage and a bridge experience into that next stage of adulthood. So you can expect to gain maturity, life skills, more ideas about what you might want to study or do for a career. All those kinds of things are really what we want to see as far as outcomes after a gap experience. Now, even though it's called gap year, a gap semester or gap period of time can really be anywhere from a few months long to 2 years long. But it is important to define the period of time that you're talking about so that you know what's going to be transitioning to for you after your gap experience. Conversely, what a gap year isn't. A gap year is not the absence of a choice, okay? So if you are really, if you did not enjoy Zoom University this year and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm just gonna not go back to college, but you don't put in any work or thought into what comes next, that is not taking a gap year. That is just kind of not having made a choice. So when you're thinking about this next period of time, you really want to do your work to figure out why you're taking this period of time and what kinds of opportunities are going to help you make the most of it. And I really want to help give you some of that information in this short overview so that you can take what you've learned and do some more research and figuring out what's good for you. So a lot of people have been wondering what has even been on offer for gap year students this year. There was a lot of people thinking about taking a gap year or either deferring college or taking a leave of absence over the summer, in summer 2021, when COVID was raging and a lot of students were announcing plans to go online. Now, some of those students decided to opt into a gap year, other students decided to go for the college route. And what I'm hearing is that a lot of students who went the college route and their colleges were not in person, those students had varying levels of quality of experience. Some really thrived and enjoyed the online experience. Others are feeling pretty frustrated, lonely, kind of cut off from the campus community that they hoped for or that they became used to if you're a current college student. So what I've seen gap year students doing this fall is actually super exciting. They're creating their own communities. They're actually having some pretty cool adventures, and they're getting some career and job experiences in various creative ways. So as you can see from these pictures, these are all current gappers who have been out in the world this fall. Now, a lot of students are choosing to stay domestic this fall, or have chosen to stay domestic, just because international travel is a little bit complicated at the moment, although we are seeing borders start to open with different testing protocols and different mitigation plans for risk of entrance into their country. And as my hope is that as we enter 2021 and the hope of vaccine and therapeutics is rising, we will start to see borders becoming more open. So if you take a gap semester, the chances are that as the spring moves along, even if you start in the country, you might be able to go and travel to even more places as the spring moves along. That said, obviously, there are a lot of things that you need to think about if you're thinking about going away from home in the context of COVID, if you're staying in the States, because we know that at this moment, as I'm taping this in mid-November, the picture is not great. So a lot of students, if they're coming home for the holidays, Thanksgiving and such, they're going to hunker down, stay put as we see ourselves through this recent surge and hopefully out of it. By January, it's still very likely that some colleges are going to make announcements that they are not going to be going back in person on campus, in which case you may want to consider a gap year if you haven't already. So what we're seeing gap year students able to do are things like small cohort-based semester programs, and that's basically able to run even if a semester on campus can't, because we're talking about 12 or 15 students, and they're doing different types of experiential learning, they're going around different places in the United States, and they're doing so in ways that are able to be socially distanced and otherwise safe. So once they create that pod in their group, they're able to interact with each other and have limited interactions in different types of scenarios. Now, what does that mean, right? Well, if you look all the way on the left, that's a group of students who are currently in Hawaii doing service learning around conservation and sustainable agriculture. So that means they're living on eco farm, like a macadamia nut farm on the big island of Hawaii. They're doing hikes, they're getting their scuba certifications, they are learning about marine ecology as well as native Hawaiian culture and language. So that's a pretty cool opportunity that they can do, and they are able to do in person with each other. My student with like the peace sign is doing an internship at an auto body shop in Worcester, Massachusetts. So he's doing a formal internship program where he's living residentially with other students and then going off to a work experience day to day. Other students, the student who's actually painting a photo or painting a picture, she's in Ireland. So there are programs that are going internationally. This fall, I've had students in Ireland, Israel, the UK, Costa Rica is currently working on its reopening, is currently open to Americans, and South Africa is open to Americans. Various parts of the Caribbean are. So depending on your comfort level for travel, there are places and programs that are currently running. We're also seeing the opportunity for Europe to be on the table for early 2021 if you are a student. So let's go over some frequently asked questions, right? So first off, can you even do anything in the context of COVID? I think that hopefully I just answered that question for you. Yes, you can. You can't do everything. The world is not quite your oyster in the way it normally is for when I'm advising gap year students. That being said, if you are frustrated after having spent a semester on your computer trying to take classes on Zoom and that's not the educational experience you want, think about a gap semester as a way to both bide your time into a later date when campus life will be more normal, as well as giving yourself the opportunity to tackle some personal goals, projects, or just learn about yourself in the context of other situations that will allow you to grow personally. Why should you take a gap year this year? I think I also just answered that, right? To grow, to explore more, to maybe give back if you're interested in volunteering. All these things are really good reasons for taking a gap year. And how do you plan your year? That is usually the biggest stumbling block that people face. So we're going to go over that on the next slide. So really what you want to do first when you're thinking about taking a gap year is reframe your expectations, right? Because if you are a college age student right now, you've already had your expectations shift multiple times since last March. So you want to keep that healthy, open mind available when you're thinking about your gap year, and really think about a gap semester or a gap year as an opportunity. It's a gift that you're giving yourself. It is not something that's being taken away from you. Next, you want to set some goals. What are your personal goals? What are your professional or career related goals? And what are your life goals? Like, are there life skills that you want to develop on this period of time? Like learning how to cook, learning how to, budget for yourself, those kinds of things. Using those goals, you can then research opportunities. That would be programs, that would be courses or other things that can help buoy these goals and help bring them really to fruition for you. From there, you create your top list of choices. You want to stay flexible. I've had a lot of students who've had to change programs because some programs have not been able to run. And that's just the world we're living in. It's not anybody's fault. Programs are really good about giving refunds or helping you transfer to later date programs. And they're just asking people to stay really flexible when it comes to making those plans. But if you have a plan B in mind or even a plan C, you can pivot really quickly and not get that disappointed because you'll always have that next thing in the back pocket that you want to do. And from there, you can set up your plan. And a plan can be multiple things or one thing, but as long as you're kind of paying attention to those goals that you want to achieve on your gap year and maybe thinking about how to stretch yourself a little bit. How can you both care for yourself in this pretty stressful moment, but also like lean into this opportunity to grow and become more independent? So this is really useful for people to understand. There's a lot of different types of gap year opportunities out there. And we can talk about them in ways that are both formal programs, which are, things that you would pay for, that are set up for you, that have a framework, that have leadership and mentors and leaders that are there to help guide you through the experience. And then there's also independent things that you can do that are not attached to a particular program, but can be just as informative for you. So there's things like volunteering and courses and experiential semesters. These are all going to be more formalized, where you can actually Google gap year programs and then what you're interested in and see what comes up. These tend to have fixed dates and they tend to have other peers on them. So if you feel a little bit isolated after this period of time, thinking about a more formal program that will have a group there for you and also have a lot of safety and risk management procedures in place to make your parents feel better. Those are all things to look for. Now, when it comes to working, traveling, interning, or personal projects, those are going to be more independent. Sometimes you can find a travel program that's doing a tour or doing some other kind of thing. There's also intern programs that that'll all help you match an internship with an area of your interest. But a lot of these things can also be done independently. You can get a job and you can find an internship through your own network or those kinds of things. I've had a lot of students this year tackling personal projects. So that would be an artistic pursuit that they want to take a deep dive into, starting a business, taking a road trip. These are all things that students are able to do this fall. And then they've been actually seeking out other gap year students and school leavers to create a community of peers. I want to give you guys a couple examples of what this can look like in practice. So, for those more formal programs where you have other peers kind of built into the program structure, they can kind of come in a couple different flavors, if you will. There's virtual programs, there's semester programs that are domestic, and there's semester programs that are international. Semester is a little bit of a loose term. It can be anywhere from 6 to 12 or 15 weeks in length. But I guess what I mean is that they're fixed date programs. So you really know when you're starting and when you're ending. Now, the virtual programs, I know a lot of students, if you're burnt out on Zoom University, you might be a little bit hesitant to do a virtual gap year program. But the virtual gap year programs, they're much more interactive and their platforms are much more about personal development and project-based learning than kind of being talked at or lecture style. So keep that in mind. And it's also an opportunity to really spend some time on developing your own intentions for the next stage of your education. Now, with your in-person opportunities, either in the States or internationally, those tend to have a lot of outdoor elements built in. That's what makes them safer to run than being in a dorm room, right? So you think about camping, you're going to be doing more things in the outdoors, even if it's not an outdoor education opportunity, you just have to be okay with being outside. And we are seeing, as far as international semesters, I mentioned before, the locations that are starting to open doors, but if you Google countries that are open to Americans right now, there's a couple articles that are updated every couple days with the country listings of what is open and able to travel to. And again, a lot of that is based on what's going on with COVID in that country, as well as what types of programming are available in that country. As far as formal gap year programs, I am seeing things that are going to be available in 2021 in places like Central America, the Caribbean, select Europe locations, South Africa and East Africa, and select places in Asia as well. So, we are seeing some diversity emerging, and hopefully more will start to come around as we get this all under control. A couple more ideas: volunteering, interning in that project, those project opportunities. Think about volunteering for some part of this period of time. I mean, it feels good for the soul, but it's also, there are some really important COVID-related volunteer projects that you can participate in your own community, as well as other communities that have been deeply affected by the COVID crisis. There's also building projects, environmental projects, person-to-person projects in community development, those kinds of things. And you can find those virtually as well as in your own community, in other communities around the country, or potentially internationally as time moves along. Same thing with interning. I often advise people to think about their own network when it comes to finding an internship. If you have a family friend or a relative who works in an area that you're interested in, ask them if they know about interning in that industry. They might be able to hook you up with something or at least get your foot in the door. If you don't have any of those kinds of connections, there are gap year internship programs that help do some of that legwork for you that you can look into. And again, with those projects, is there something that you just want to do with this period of time? Don't be afraid. I've had students who've, gotten really good at baking and, like I said before, started a business or have been, training for a long hike that they're going to do after COVID has settled down a bit. So thinking about your own personal goals is really important. So things to ask yourself as you're getting started with the planning process. Think about those goals and think about how they might be reached in different scenarios. So say we are still in a lockdown mode in January and February. Could you still learn Spanish if you were in lockdown? The answer is yes, because there are virtual language programs that you could practice your language on in January and February. And then perhaps by March or April, you might be able to go to Costa Rica or somewhere else and practice that language in person. What are your strengths and what do you have to give? So think about what you're really good at, what you want to work on, where you need to do some work on yourself during this period of time. Thinking about your hobbies and what you want to spend time on, what you find joy in. I mean, self-care is such an important part of this period of time, and giving yourself the time to really be at peace and find joy is really important. Learning a foreign language or getting better at a foreign language is always a well-used period of time. And there's even these virtual opportunities where you can do like intercambrio with people abroad through Zoom and other online platforms, which is pretty cool. Thinking about your own value set. So if there was something you could change in the world, what would it be? I've had students volunteering in climate action. There was a ton of gap year students working on election stuff. So if there's an issue that you really care about, there's going to be a nonprofit, a politician, another way, another outlet for you to engage with that work. What are your personal, practical, and professional goals? That is definitely an exercise to do after you watch this video. Write down those 3 categories and think about 2 or 3 things in each of those categories that you could work on that are personal, practical, and professional. And think about the other experiences that you've had before in your life, both educational and experiential, that you have loved, and seek out those kinds of experience in new ways for your gap time. So again, this was a bit of a quick overview. I wanted to make it really digestible for anybody who really needs this advice and wants it fast. If you would like to connect with me, afterwards and have questions, or if you want to learn more about how I can help you formally with your gap year planning, I'm very easy to find. You can find me at enroutegapyear.com. I have half-year consultations available for families and students who are doing those gap semesters, as well as full-year ones where I work with a student to the whole planning process and execution of their gap year that runs on the whole academic year. I also have a planning course. If you just want a little bit of help and want to go take a deeper dive into those building blocks that go into building out a gap semester or gap year, I have a low-cost planning course that you can access through my website as well. Last slide, just some resources for onward planning. I have a podcast called Gap Year Radio that I co-host with a friend, Margot, and we interview gap year alums. That is an awesome place to get gap year information from students and other experts that really know what they're talking about, as well as the Gap Year Association. They have all sorts of program listings. They have their own planning guide that you can download. And in February, we will be hosting Gap Year Exploration Month with all sorts of online and virtual events to get you educated in all that is gap year. USA Gap Year Fairs is normally an in-person kind of circuit of in-person fairs, kind of like college fairs, but this year they're all going to be virtual. So check out gooverseas.com/fairs to learn more about the virtual events that they'll be doing this year. And finally, serviceyear.org is a great place to look for national service opportunities. So think of AmeriCorps and NCCC, City Year types of opportunities. You can look on serviceyear.org for those. And find me on Instagram. I'm at En Route Gap Year. I post all the time about what different students are doing, other kinds of resources, and just about gap year news in general. So thank you so much for spending some of your time with me. Don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions, and happy planning.